Francesca, darling, could you be a lamb and fetch my reading glasses? I simply cannot make heads or tails of this seating chart without them. I looked up from the crystal champagne flutes I'd been polishing, because apparently that's what wives do at charity galas, and met Deborah's expectant gaze. My mother-in-law stood there in her Chanel suit, one perfectly manicured hand pressed to her forehead like she was auditioning for a Victorian fainting scene. "Of course," I said, setting down the cloth. "Where did you leave them?" "Oh, I haven't the faintest idea. Perhaps check the morning room or the library. You know how scattered I get when I'm planning these events." Scattered. Right. Deborah could recite the Forbes 400 from memory, but somehow misplaced her glasses every time I was within earshot. "My name is Francesca, and I've been married into the Summers family for 6 years. 6 years of being treated like the help at my own husband's charity events. I found the glasses exactly where I knew they'd be, sitting on Deborah's nightstand, probably placed there deliberately. When I returned to the ballroom of their Beacon Hill mansion, she was deep in conversation with Carmen, Orlando's sister. Honestly don't know what Orlando was thinking, Carmen was saying, her voice carrying that particular pitch women use when they want to be overheard. I mean, she's pretty enough, but at these events you need someone who can actually hold a conversation about more than, well, whatever it is she does all day. The foundation board members expect a certain level of sophistication, Deborah replied, accepting her glasses from me without so much as a glance. Thank goodness we have you and me to handle the real networking tonight. I could have mentioned that I'd graduated summa cum laude from MIT. I could have pointed out that while they were networking, I'd been quietly building something they couldn't even comprehend. Instead, I smiled and went back to polishing crystal. "Francesca," Orlando's voice boomed across the ballroom. My husband strode in wearing his favourite navy suit, the one that made him look like he belonged on a yacht club brochure. "There you are. Shane's here, and we need to go over some last-minute details." Shane Hicks followed behind him, all slicked-back hair and expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the smell of desperation. Orlando's business partner had the kind of smile that made you want to count your fingers after shaking his hand. "Ladies," Shane nodded to Deborah and Carmen, then his eyes slid over me like I was part of the furniture. "Everything looks spectacular. This gala's going to save the foundation's reputation." "Save it?" I asked, looking up from the champagne flutes. Orlando's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Just an expression, sweetheart. Shane means it'll enhance our already stellar reputation." But Shane was already pulling out his phone, typing furiously. "We should talk privately," he muttered to Orlando. "Use the study," Deborah suggested. "Francesca, dear, could you see about the flower arrangements? I think the lilies in the foyer are looking a bit peaked." I nodded and headed toward the foyer, but stopped when I heard Shane's voice through the study's slightly open door. "Complete disaster if this gets out. The board's already asking questions about the missing funds." "Keep your voice down," Orlando hissed. "We just need to get through tonight. Once we announce the anonymous donation, everyone will forget about the audit." $2 million, Orlando. That's not pocket change, even for your family. And if they trace it back, they won't. The donor insisted on complete anonymity until the reveal tonight. We use the donation to cover what's missing, and nobody's the wiser. My hands stilled on the lily stems. Missing funds, anonymous donation, cover-up. What if the donor changes their mind? Shane's voice was getting higher. What if they want credit before we can? Then we're screwed, Orlando said flatly. But they won't. Trust me, I know exactly how to handle people like this. They want to feel important, make a big splash. We give them their moment, and everyone wins. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. The foundation, the crown jewel of the Summers family legacy, the thing Deborah never stopped bragging about, was in trouble, real trouble. And somehow they had an anonymous donor ready to bail them out. I walked back to the ballroom, picked up another champagne flute, and started polishing. But this time I was smiling. Because I knew exactly who that anonymous donor was. The coffee shop on Newbury Street was busy enough that nobody would notice two people having a quiet conversation in the corner. I'd chosen it specifically for that reason. Leighton Webb sat across from me, nervously stirring his latte for the third time. "I shouldn't be here," he said, glancing around like Orlando might materialize from behind the pastry display. "If they find out I'm talking to you—" "They won't," I said, sliding a manila envelope across the small table. "But I need you to look at this first." Leighton opened the envelope and his face went pale. Inside were printouts of financial records, bank transfers, and email chains I'd been quietly collecting for months. My little fintech startup had given me access to some very interesting financial tracking software. "How did you—" he started. "Does it matter? What matters is whether I'm right." He flipped through the pages, his hands shaking slightly. "Jesus, Francesca, this is everything. The shell companies, the redirected donations, even the fake invoices Shane created. So, I am right. Orlando and Shane have been embezzling from the foundation for almost 2 years," Leighton confirmed, closing the envelope quickly. "I tried to bring it to the board's attention 6 months ago, but Orlando convinced them I was having a nervous breakdown. Said the stress of the audit was getting to me." "How much?" "Total, nearly 3 million. They've been using foundation money to cover Orlando's gambling debts and Shane's failed investments. The charity work, the grants, the scholarships, all of it's been running on fumes." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the information settle. "And the anonymous donation they're expecting tonight?" Leighton's eyes widened. "You know about that?" "I know a lot of things. The question is, what happens if that donation doesn't come through? The foundation collapses publicly. The board will demand a full investigation. The IRS will get involved and—" He rubbed his forehead. "Orlando and Shane will probably go to prison." "Good." The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Leighton stared at me. "Francesca, I know your marriage isn't perfect, but this will destroy him. Destroy the whole family." "The whole family has been trying to destroy me for 6 years, I said. "Maybe it's time they got a taste of their own medicine." My phone buzzed. A text from Penny. "Coffee later. Need to hear how the recon mission went." I smiled and typed back, "Can't wait to tell you." "There's something else," Leighton said quietly. "Shane's been pressuring me to alter the books. Make it look like the missing money was spent on legitimate expenses. He says if I don't cooperate, he'll make sure I never work in accounting again." "What did you tell him?" "That I needed more time. But Francesca, if they're desperate enough to threaten me—" He leaned forward. "Be careful. Desperate people do stupid things." I left the coffee shop and drove straight to Penny's apartment in the South End. She opened the door before I could knock, probably because I'd been texting her updates all the morning. "Spill," she said, pulling me inside, "and don't leave out any details." Penny had been my roommate at MIT and the only person who'd warned me about marrying Orlando. She'd also been the only person to visit me regularly after the wedding, when the Summers family made it clear that my old friends weren't quite their caliber. "They're embezzlers," I said, collapsing onto her couch. "Orlando and Shane have been stealing from the foundation for 2 years. "Holy shit." Penny sat down next to me. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let them think they're getting away with it, right up until the moment I pull the rug out from under them." "At the gala?" "At the gala." Penny was quiet for a moment. "Fran, are you sure about this? I mean, I hate Orlando as much as the next person, but this is nuclear. There's no coming back from something like this." "Good," I said. "I don't want to come back. I want out, and I want them to pay for every snide comment, every dismissive look, every time they made me feel like I was nothing." "What about the donation, the one they're expecting?" I smiled. "Oh, that's the best part. The anonymous donor they're counting on to save their asses? That's me." Penny's jaw dropped. "You're kidding." $2 million. Enough to cover what they stole and make them look like heroes, except... I pulled out my phone and showed her the donation agreement I'd had my lawyer draft. The donation comes with conditions: complete anonymity until the donor chooses to reveal themselves, and the donor reserves the right to withdraw the funds at any time before the official transfer. "You magnificent, vengeful genius," Penny breathed. "You're going to let them announce it, let them bask in the glory, and then I'm going to stand up in front of everyone and tell them exactly who I am and exactly what they've done." My phone rang. "Orlando." "Where are you?" he demanded when I answered. "Mother's been looking for you. We need to do a final walkthrough before tonight." "On my way," I said sweetly, "just picking up my dress from the cleaners." "Good. And Francesca, try to stay out of the way tonight. This is important for the family." "Don't worry," I said, catching Penny's grin. "I'll make sure tonight is unforgettable." The Summers mansion buzzed with activity when I returned. Caterers rushed between the kitchen and ballroom, florists adjusted centerpieces, and Deborah stood in the middle of it all like a general commanding troops. "Francesca!" she called out the moment she spotted me. "Finally! Come here, I need to discuss your role tonight." I walked over, noting how she positioned herself so I had to look up at her on the grand staircase. "Now, as you know, tonight is absolutely crucial for the Foundation's reputation," she began, her voice carrying that tone she used when explaining things to children. "We'll have board members, major donors, and several journalists in attendance." "Sounds important," I said. "It is, which is why I need you to understand your place tonight." She descended a few steps, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "You'll be seated at table 12 with some of the younger wives. Try to keep the conversation light. Fashion, travel, that sort of thing. Nothing too cerebral." Carmen appeared from the dining room carrying a clipboard. "Mother, the photographer wants to know about family photos. Should we do them before or after the donor announcement?" "Before, definitely. We want to capture the anticipation." Deborah turned back to me. "Francesca, dear, you might want to touch up your makeup before the photos. The lighting can be so unforgiving." "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "Oh, and one more thing." Deborah's smile turned razor sharp. "I know you mean well, but please don't try to insert yourself into conversations about the Foundation's work. Some of our guests tonight have been supporting charitable causes since before you were born. They can spot inexperience from a mile away." Carmen giggled. "Remember last year when she tried to talk to Senator Morrison about economic policy? Poor man looked so confused. Senator Morrison asked me about my thoughts on cryptocurrency regulation," I said evenly. "I was just answering his question." "Cryptocurrency," Deborah repeated, like I'd said unicorns. "Yes, well, tonight let's stick to topics you're more comfortable with." My phone buzzed with a text from Scott, my cousin and lawyer. "Everything's ready on my end. Prenup is ironclad. Assets are protected. You sure about this?" I typed back, "Never been more sure of anything." "Who's that?" Carmen asked, trying to peek at my phone. "Just confirming my hair appointment," I lied smoothly. Orlando walked in from the study, Shane trailing behind him. Both men looked tense. "How are we doing, ladies?" Orlando asked, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Wonderfully," Deborah said. "I was just explaining to Francesca how important tonight is." "Good." Orlando's gaze fixed on me. "We can't afford any surprises." "What kind of surprises would I possibly have?" I asked innocently. Shane laughed, but it sounded forced. "Your wife's got a sense of humour, Orlando." "Hilarious," Orlando muttered. "Francesca, I need you to be extra charming tonight. Smile, nod. Let everyone see what a perfect family we are." "Perfect," I repeated. "Got it." Carmen's phone rang. "It's the caterer," she announced, walking away to answer it. "I should check on the flowers," Deborah said, following Carmen toward the ballroom. That left me alone with Orlando and Shane. "Perfect." "So," I said casually, "this anonymous donor, that's quite a stroke of luck." Orlando's jaw tightened. "What about it?" Just seems convenient. The foundation needs money and suddenly someone appears with exactly the right amount. Shane cleared his throat. These things happen. Wealthy people like to support good causes. $2 million, though. That's not exactly pocket change. Some people have deeper pockets than others, Orlando said curtly. Why the sudden interest in foundation finances? Can't a wife be curious about her husband's work? Orlando stepped closer, his voice dropping. Francesca, I need you to listen very carefully. Tonight is not the time for your little games. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you've figured out, forget it. I don't know what you mean. Don't play dumb. It doesn't suit you. His hand gripped my arm, just tight enough to make his point. This family has been good to you. We've given you a life most women would kill for. Don't forget that. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Of course, how could I forget? He released me, his expression softening into his public smile. Good. Now go get ready. And remember, smile, nod, look pretty. That's all anyone expects from you tonight. After they left, I stood alone in the foyer looking at the red mark Orlando's grip had left on my arm. 6 years of this. 6 years of being treated like an accessory, a pretty decoration for their perfect family portrait. My phone rang. Penny. How's the lion's den? She asked. About what I expected. Deborah wants me to stick to discussing fashion with the other wives, and Orlando just physically reminded me to stay in my lane. He put his hands on you. Nothing dramatic. Just a little intimidation. I rubbed my arm. But it's the last time he'll ever touch me. Fran, I have to go. Hair appointment, then the final preparations. By tomorrow morning, none of this will matter anymore. Are you scared? I looked around the mansion, the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the oil paintings of Orlando's ancestors, looking down with disapproval. All of it built on lies and stolen money. No, I said, I'm excited. The ballroom glittered like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk, and the foundation's logo, a stylized tree with golden leaves, decorated everything from the napkins to the massive banner behind the stage. I stood near the bar in my navy blue gown, watching Orlando work the room. He moved from group to group with practiced ease, shaking hands and flashing that $1 million smile that had fooled me once upon a time. Francesca! A woman in emerald green approached me. I recognized her as Mrs. Patterson, wife of one of the foundation's board members. You look absolutely stunning tonight. Thank you, I said, accepting her air kisses. You look lovely too. I'm so excited about tonight's announcement. Orlando's been very mysterious about this anonymous donor. She leaned in conspiratorially. Any hints? I'm as curious as you are, I said truthfully. Across the room, Deborah held court with a cluster of journalists, her voice carrying over the cocktail chatter. Truly humbled by this generous gift, she was saying. It's donors like this who remind us why the Foundation's work is so vital. This $2 million donation will allow us to expand our scholarship program and fund 3 new community centres. The reporters scribbled notes eagerly. One raised her hand. Mrs. Summers, can you tell us anything about the donor's identity? I'm afraid not. They've insisted on complete anonymity, at least for now. But I can tell you there's someone who truly understands the Foundation's mission. Carmen appeared at my elbow, champagne flute in hand. Isn't this exciting? Mother's been planning this moment for weeks. I'm sure she has, I said. You know, Francesca, I have to say you're handling all this attention very well. Usually you get so overwhelmed at these events. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and Orlando stepped onto the small stage. The crowd quieted, turning their attention toward him. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the annual Summers Foundation Gala. His voice boomed through the sound system. Tonight, we celebrate not just our achievements, but the incredible generosity of our supporters. Applause filled the room. I spotted Shane near the back, nervously adjusting his tie. As many of you know, this year has brought unique challenges, Orlando continued, but it's also brought extraordinary opportunities. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that an anonymous donor has made a commitment that will transform our foundation's ability to serve the community. More applause. Deborah beamed from her front row table. $2 million, Orlando announced, and the room erupted. $2 million that will fund scholarships, community programs, and initiatives we've only dreamed of until now. I watched the faces around me, the genuine excitement, the impressed nods, the way people looked at Orlando with newfound respect. They had no idea they were applauding stolen money being used to cover up more stolen money. Now, I know what you're thinking, Orlando said, his grin widening. Who is this mysterious benefactor? Well, I can't reveal their identity tonight. They've insisted on anonymity. But I can tell you there's someone very close to our hearts. He looked directly at me and winked. Several people followed his gaze, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Someone who understands that real change happens when we work together, he continued. Someone who believes in the power of community, of lifting each other up. The crowd was eating it up. Orlando had always been good at this, making people believe in his version of the truth. But you know what? Orlando's voice took on a more casual tone. I have to admit, when I first heard about this donation, I was shocked. I mean, $2 million? That's serious money. The kind of money that requires serious thought, serious planning. A few chuckles rippled through the audience. I actually turned to my beautiful wife here and said, Francesca, honey, can you believe someone would just give away $2 million like that? He gestured toward me, and several people turned to look. And you know what she said? I hadn't said anything. We'd never had that conversation. She said, Orlando, some people just have more money than sense. Orlando laughed, and the crowd laughed with him. Now, I love my wife dearly, but let's be honest, she's not exactly our family's financial mastermind. She's more of a, well, let's just say she's much better at spending money than understanding where it comes from. The laughter was louder now. I felt every eye in the room on me, saw the amused smiles, the knowing looks between couples. But that's okay, Orlando continued, his tone affectionate but condescending. Not everyone can be good with numbers. Some people are just blessed with other talents, like looking absolutely gorgeous in that dress tonight. He blew me a kiss, and the crowd applauded. I smiled and gave a little wave, playing the part of the adoring, slightly dim wife. Anyway, Orlando said, turning back to the audience, whoever our anonymous donor is, they've given us an incredible gift, and I promise you every penny will be used exactly as intended. As he continued his speech, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. Leighton stood behind me, looking nervous in his rented tuxedo. Mrs. Summers, he whispered, could I speak with you privately? It's important. I followed him to a quiet corner near the coat check. He pulled a manila folder from inside his jacket. I couldn't wait until after, he said, pressing it into my hands. Shane cornered me an hour ago. He knows I've been asking questions, and he's planning to pin everything on me if this goes south. I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, email printouts, and what looked like a confession letter in Leighton's handwriting. This is everything, he said. Every transaction, every forged signature, every lie they told the board. Shane's signature is on half of these documents. Leighton, there's more. Orlando's been using Foundation credit cards for personal expenses, gambling debts mostly. Shane's been covering for him, but they're both in this up to their necks. The folder felt heavy in my hands. This wasn't just embezzlement anymore. This was systematic fraud. Thank you, I said quietly. Mrs. Summers, a young woman with a clipboard approached us. I'm Celeste, the event coordinator. We're ready for the donor reveal whenever you'd like. I looked at her, then at Leighton, then back at the stage where Orlando was still basking in applause. Actually, I said, I think it's time. Wait, I said to Celeste, gripping the folder tighter. Give me 5 more minutes. I need to make a quick call." She nodded and disappeared back into the crowd. I pulled out my phone and dialed Scott. "It's time," I said when he answered. "You sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." "I'm sure. Are the papers ready?" "Divorce papers are filed and ready to serve. The financial disclosures are prepared, and I've got a contact at the Herald who's standing by for the story." "Perfect. See you tomorrow." I hung up and turned to Leighton. "Are you ready for this to get messy?" "I've been ready for 2 years," he said. "Just promise me Orlando and Shane won't be able to retaliate. After tonight, they'll have bigger problems than you." Orlando was wrapping up his speech when I returned to the ballroom. "And so, let's raise our glasses to the future of the Summers Foundation." The crowd lifted their champagne flutes. I grabbed one from a passing waiter and joined the toast, smiling as everyone drank to their own destruction. "Now," Orlando continued, "I believe our event coordinator has something special planned for us." Celeste took the microphone, her voice bright and professional. "Thank you, Orlando. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful surprise tonight. Our anonymous donor has agreed to reveal themselves to you." Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. Deborah sat up straighter, her eyes scanning the room like she was trying to guess who it might be. "This generous individual has asked to say a few words about why they chose to support the Summers Foundation," Celeste continued. "So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming—" She paused, looking at the card in her hand with confusion. "I'm sorry, there seems to be some mistake. The card just says Mrs. Francesca Summers." The room went dead silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward me, could see Orlando's face drain of colour on the stage. "That's not a mistake," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's exactly right." I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, whispers following in my wake. "Francesca?" Orlando's voice cracked slightly. "What are you doing?" I climbed the steps to the stage and took the microphone from Celeste's trembling hands. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the ice clinking in people's glasses. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady and clear. "For those who don't know me, I'm Francesca Summers, Orlando's wife, the one who's better at spending money than understanding where it comes from." A few nervous chuckles, but mostly stunned silence. "I'm also your anonymous donor, the person who pledged $2 million to save this foundation." Gasps echoed through the room. I saw Deborah's mouth fall open, saw Carmen grab her mother's arm. "Now, I know what you're thinking. How could someone like me, someone who Orlando just told you has more money than sense, possibly have $2 million to donate?" Orlando stepped toward me, his face pale. "Francesca, what are you—" "Please don't interrupt, darling. I'm just getting started." I turned back to the audience. "You see, while my husband and his family have spent the last 6 years treating me like an expensive decoration, I've been building something. A little fintech company that you've probably never heard of. Nothing too impressive, just a few patents, some government contracts, the usual boring tech stuff." I could see people pulling out their phones, probably Googling my name. "The company's worth about $50 million now. Not bad for someone who's not exactly the family's financial mastermind, right?" Orlando's face had gone from pale to red. "Francesca, stop this right now." "Oh, but we're just getting to the good part." I held up Leighton's folder. "You see, when I decided to make this generous donation, I wanted to make sure the foundation was financially sound. So I did a little digging. Shane was pushing through the crowd toward the stage, but security stepped in his way. And what I found was fascinating. Did you know that over the past 2 years, nearly $3 million has gone missing from the foundation's accounts?" The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Board members were standing up, looking confused and angry. $3 million, I repeated, funneled through shell companies, fake invoices and unauthorized transfers, all signed off on by the foundation's president and his business partner. "You're lying," Orlando hissed, but his voice wasn't carrying through the sound system. Am I? I opened the folder and pulled out a bank statement. This shows a transfer of $200,000 from the foundation to something called Beacon Consulting. Guess who owns Beacon Consulting? I looked directly at Shane, who was now trying to push past security. And this, I held up another document, shows foundation credit cards being used at the Mohegan Sun Casino repeatedly for amounts totaling over $500,000. Deborah had gone completely white. Carmen was frantically whispering to someone on her phone. So here's the thing, I continued, my voice growing stronger. I pledged $2 million to save this foundation, but I can't, in good conscience, donate money to an organization that's been systematically defrauded by its own leadership. Francesca, please. Orlando reached for the microphone, but I stepped back, which is why I'm officially withdrawing my donation, effective immediately. The room exploded. People were shouting, reporters were taking pictures, and board members were demanding answers. But I wasn't done yet. Oh, and one more thing, I said, waiting for the noise to die down. Orlando, I'm divorcing you. The papers will be served tomorrow morning. Orlando lunged for me, but I was already walking off the stage, leaving him standing there in front of 300 people, his perfect facade crumbling in real time. As I reached the ballroom floor, Celeste caught up with me, her face flushed with excitement and terror. Mrs. Summers, she whispered urgently, there are news crews outside. They want a statement. I smiled, clutching Leighton's folder to my chest. Tell them I'll be right there. The ballroom had descended into complete chaos. Guests clustered in tight groups, their voices rising as they tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Board members surrounded Orlando on the stage, their faces red with anger and confusion. "This is insane!" Deborah's voice cut through the noise as she pushed toward the stage. "Francesca has lost her mind. Someone needs to stop her." But I was already walking toward the exit, Leighton's folder tucked under my arm like a shield. Behind me, I could hear Orlando shouting, "She's lying! This is all fabricated! She's having some kind of breakdown!" Senator Morrison, one of the foundation's biggest supporters, stepped into Orlando's path. "Then you won't mind if we call an emergency board meeting to review these allegations?" "Of course not," Orlando said, but his voice cracked. "But this is hardly the time or place." "Actually," said Mrs. Patterson, her emerald dress catching the light as she climbed onto the stage, "I think this is exactly the time and place. Margaret, call the other board members. We're convening right now." Shane had finally broken free from security and was making his way toward the back exit. I caught his eye across the room and smiled. He froze like a deer in headlights. "Shane," I called out sweetly, "leaving so soon? Don't you want to stick around for the board meeting?" Every head in the room turned toward him. He stood there for a moment, sweat beading on his forehead, then bolted for the door. "Stop him!" Senator Morrison shouted, but Shane was already gone. Carmen appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with panic. "Francesca, please, you have to tell them this is all a misunderstanding. The family what, Carmen? The family that spent 6 years treating me like hired help? The family that just watched Orlando humiliate me in front of 300 people? But the foundation helps so many people. The foundation is broke, Carmen. It's been running on stolen money for 2 years. Those scholarships, those community centres, they're all funded by embezzled donations." Carmen's face crumpled. But Mother said—" "Your mother knew." I pulled out one of Leighton's documents. "This email is from Deborah to Orlando, asking him to handle the audit situation quietly. She's been covering for him." Carmen stared at the paper, her hands shaking. Oh God, what are we going to do?" "We!" I laughed. "Carmen, there is no we. There never was. You made that clear every time you laughed at your brother's jokes about his stupid wife." I walked away from her, heading for the exit. The crowd parted around me, some people staring with fascination, others with disgust. I caught fragments of conversation as I passed. Always knew there was something off about that family. $2 million, can you believe it? Poor girl, married to a criminal. Near the door, I spotted Leighton talking urgently to a woman with a press badge. When he saw me, he hurried over. "The Herald reporter is here," he said quietly. "She wants to interview you." "Perfect. What about the police?" "Already called. They're sending detectives to review the evidence." Behind us, the chaos was reaching a crescendo. Orlando had left the stage and was now surrounded by board members, all talking at once. Deborah stood in the centre of another group, her voice shrill as she tried to control the narrative. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," she was saying. "My daughter-in-law is clearly having some sort of episode. The stress of the marriage, you understand." "Actually," said a voice from the back of the room, "I think she's the sanest person here." Everyone turned. Penny stood in the doorway, still in her jeans and MIT sweatshirt, looking completely out of place among the evening gowns and tuxedos. "Penny?" I stared at her. "What are you doing here? You think I was going to miss this?" She grinned and held up her phone. "I've been live tweeting the whole thing, and Summer's scandal is already trending." Orlando spotted her and his face darkened. "Security, get that woman out of here." "Actually," Penny said, pulling out a press badge, "I'm here as a journalist, freelance tech reporter, and I have some very interesting information about Mrs. Summers' company that I think people would love to hear." The crowd pressed closer. Penny cleared her throat dramatically. "Francesca's fintech startup. It's not just worth $50 million. It's been acquired by Goldman Sachs for $200 million. The deal closed yesterday." The room went dead silent. I felt every eye in the place turn back to me. $200 million, Penny repeated, which makes Francesca one of the wealthiest self-made women in Boston. Funny how Orlando forgot to mention that when he was calling her financially clueless. Orlando's face had gone grey. That's impossible." "Is it?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the contract signature page. "The acquisition was finalised at 3 p.m. yesterday. I was going to surprise you with the news after the gala." "You..." Orlando stared at the phone screen. "You've been planning this?" "For months," I confirmed. "Every insult, every dismissive comment, every time you made me feel small, I was planning this." Deborah pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with rage. "You manipulative little..." "Careful, Deborah," I said softly. "There are reporters here." She stopped short, realizing that cameras were now pointed at her. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You're right," I said, tucking the folder under my arm. "It's just beginning." I walked toward the exit, Penny falling into step beside me. Behind us, the Summers family's perfect world was collapsing in real time, and I could hear every beautiful second of it. "So," Penny said as we reached the door, "how does it feel to be free?" I looked back one last time at the chaos I'd created, at Orlando standing alone on the stage while his empire crumbled around him. "Ask me tomorrow," I said. "When the real fun begins." The mansion's front steps were packed with news crews. Camera lights blazed in the darkness, and reporters shouted questions as soon as they spotted me. "Mrs. Summers, can you comment on the allegations? Is it true you're worth $200 million? What's your response to your husband's claims that you're having a breakdown?" I stopped at the top of the steps, Penny beside me, and looked out at the sea of cameras. Behind me, I could hear the ballroom doors opening as guests spilled out onto the front lawn. "I'll make one statement," I said, and the crowd quieted. "For 6 years, I've been told I'm not smart enough, not sophisticated enough, not worthy enough to be part of this family. Tonight, I proved them wrong." "What about the embezzlement allegations?" a reporter called out. "The evidence speaks for itself. I've turned everything over to the authorities." "Mrs. Summers," another voice, "are you really divorcing your husband?" "The papers were filed this afternoon. My marriage is over." Behind me, Orlando burst through the doors. Deborah and Carmen closed behind. His tuxedo was rumpled, his hair dishevelled. "Francesca!" he shouted. "Get back here! We need to talk!" I turned to face him, the cameras swivelling to capture the confrontation. "We have nothing to talk about, Orlando." You can't just destroy everything we've built. We didn't build anything. You stole it." Orlando started down the steps toward me, but 2 men in suits stepped into his path. "Mr. Summers, Detective Rodriguez, Boston PD, we'd like to ask you some questions." Orlando's face went white. I need to call my lawyer." "That's your right," the detective said, "but we're going to need you to come with us." "This is ridiculous," Deborah shrieked from the doorway. "My son is innocent. This is all her doing." She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "Mum," the second detective said, "we'd like to speak with you as well." The crowd of reporters pressed closer, cameras flashing. I could see guests from the gala gathering on the lawn, their faces a mix of shock and fascination. "Wait!" Carmen pushed past her mother, stumbling down the steps in her heels. "Wait, please!" Everyone turned to look at her. She stood there in her silver gown, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't keep lying." "Carmen, shut up!" Orlando hissed, but the detectives were already moving toward her. "Ma'am, what do you mean by lying?" Detective Rodriguez asked gently. Carmen looked at her mother, then at Orlando, then back at the detective. "The foundation money, I knew about it. I helped them hide it." Deborah let out a strangled cry. "Carmen, no!" "I'm sorry, Mother, but I'm not going to prison for this." Carmen turned to the cameras. "Shane came to me 6 months ago. He said they needed help moving money around, making the books look clean. He said it was just temporary, that they'd pay it all back." "You stupid girl!" Deborah screamed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "What I've done?" Carmen laughed hysterically. "What about what you've done? You knew Orlando was gambling away foundation money. You knew Shane was stealing from the accounts, and you made me help cover it up." The reporters were going crazy, shouting questions and taking pictures. I could see phones everywhere, people live streaming the meltdown. "Mrs. Summers," Detective Rodriguez said to Deborah, "you're under arrest for the conspiracy to commit fraud." "This is insane," Deborah shrieked as they handcuffed her. "I'm a pillar of this community. I've donated millions to charity." "With other people's money," I said quietly. Orlando tried to run. He actually tried to run, pushing through the crowd of reporters and guests. But there were too many people, too many cameras. He made it maybe 20 feet before the detectives caught up with him. "Orlando Summers, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud," Detective Rodriguez announced as they cuffed him. The crowd erupted, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and guests from the gala stood on the lawn in their evening wear, watching the Summers family dynasty collapse in real time. "Francesca!" Orlando shouted as they led him toward the police car. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started." I walked down the steps until I was face to face with him. "I know exactly what I've started. Justice." "Justice?" He laughed bitterly. "You destroyed a family. You destroyed a foundation that helped thousands of people." "No," I said. "You did that. I just made sure everyone found out about it." As the police cars pulled away, the crowd began to disperse. Reporters rushed off to file their stories, guests called Ubers to escape the chaos, and the mansion stood empty behind us. Penny put her arm around my shoulders. "So," she said, "how does it feel now?" I looked at the mansion where I'd spent 6 years being made to feel small. The windows were dark now, the party over, the family scattered. "Like I can finally breathe," I said. But even as I said it, I knew this was just the beginning. The real consequences were still coming. The coffee shop on Newbury Street looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks ago when I'd met Leighton to plan Orlando's downfall. But everything else had changed. I sat in the same corner booth, scrolling through news articles on my phone. The headlines were brutal. Summers Foundation scandal deepens. Socialite family's criminal empire exposed. Tech heiress brings down Boston dynasty. "Mind if I sit?" I looked up to see Leighton standing there with 2 cups of coffee. He looked better than he had in months. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, and he was actually smiling. Please, I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. He sat down and slid one of the cups toward me. Thought you might need the caffeine. I saw the interview you did with Channel 5 this morning. How'd I look? Like someone who's finally sleeping at night. I laughed. That's because I am. For the first time in 6 years. Any word on the sentencing? Orlando got 8 years, Shane got 6, Deborah got 3 years in community service. I took a sip of coffee. Carmen got probation and a hefty fine for cooperating. Good, she was the only one who showed any remorse. My phone buzzed with a text from Scott. Divorce finalised. You're officially free. I showed Leighton the message. It's done. I'm no longer a Summers. How does it feel? Weird. Good weird, but still weird. I set my phone down. What about you? Any word on the new job? Leighton's smile widened. I start Monday. The State Attorney General's office wants me to head up their financial crimes unit. Apparently, exposing a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme looks good on a resume. Congratulations, you deserve it. We both do. He raised his coffee cup. To justice, I agreed, clinking my cup against his. The bell above the door chimed and Penny walked in, her arms full of newspapers. She spotted us and hurried over. You're not going to believe this, she said, dropping into the booth beside me. She spread the papers across the table. Look at these headlines. The Boston Globe. Summers Foundation victims to receive full restitution. The Herald. Anonymous donor establishes new scholarship fund. The Wall Street Journal. Tech entrepreneurs' revenge sparks charity reform movement. Anonymous donor? I asked, raising an eyebrow at Penny. Hey, you said you wanted to do something good with the money from the acquisition. I just helped you figure out how. I picked up the Globe article and read aloud. The newly established Phoenix Foundation will provide scholarships and community support to victims of financial fraud. The Foundation's anonymous benefactor has pledged $50 million over the next 5 years. Phoenix, Leighton said, rising from the ashes. I like it. The best part, Penny said, grinning, is that 3 of the Summers Foundation's former board members have already asked to join the Phoenix board. They want to help rebuild what Orlando destroyed. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Carmen's name. Should I answer it? I asked. Your call, Penny said. I swiped to accept. Hello, Carmen. Francesca. Her voice was small, shaky. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For not destroying me completely. You could have. You had enough evidence to send me to prison for years. I was quiet for a moment. You were the only one who told the truth when it mattered. I was a coward for 6 years. I let them treat you terribly, and I participated in it. I'm sorry. I know you are. The house is going up for sale next week. The lawyers say we need to liquidate everything to pay restitution to the Foundation's victims. Good. Those people deserve their money back. Carmen was quiet for a long moment. What you did, it was brilliant, terrifying, but brilliant. It was necessary. I know. And Francesca, I'm glad you're free. After I hung up, Penny leaned back in the booth. So, what now? You've got more money than you know what to do with. You're free from the worst family in Boston, and you're basically a folk hero to every woman who's ever been underestimated. Now I figure out who I want to be, I said. For 6 years, I was Orlando's wife, the Summers family disappointment. Before that, I was the quiet girl who built companies in her spare time. But I've never just been me. And who is that? Leighton asked. I looked around the coffee shop at the normal people living their normal lives, unburdened by the weight of other people's expectations. I guess I'm about to find out. Penny grinned. Well, whoever you decide to be, I hope she's half as badass as the woman who took down the Summers family. Oh, I said, standing up and gathering the newspapers. I think she's going to be even better. As we walked out of the coffee shop together, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognised, confident, free, unafraid. She looked like someone who could do anything. And for the first time in my life, I believed it.
It seems my dear husband has changed somehow. He told me, I'm giving this house to Olivia. If you don't agree, we might need to consider divorce. I was stunned. Why would he give away the house that I bought and lovingly maintained in my name to our eldest son's wife, Olivia? Maybe you should start looking for a new place soon, he said. It was clear he had a lot of trust in Olivia. With the house in my name and the $1,200 mortgage, I could manage. My eldest son seemed to think the same way. Honestly, I'm not that attached to this old house. All right, I'll move out, I said, but be prepared for the challenges you three might face in the future. I'm Kate, 50 years old, with a solid position at a major company. I live a relaxed life with my husband Paul, who is 2 years younger than me. Last year, we decided to renovate our slightly outdated house, which my father had built. We hoped the renovations would set us up nicely for retirement. The mortgage is $3,000 a month, which I can handle comfortably with my salary. Paul, who manages a small restaurant, earns less, so it seemed practical to put the mortgage in my name. He once mentioned that covering the mortgage payments with just my income might be tough, but we managed. This house was originally your father's and is now in your name, Paul had said. Can you handle the full payments? I'll cover our living expenses. After the renovations, the house looked fantastic, and we were thrilled about our refreshed home and the future ahead. But then, things took an unexpected turn. One day, my phone buzzed with a surprising message from our eldest son, David. I'm thinking of getting married, he said. At 31, David had always been dedicated to his work and had never mentioned a girlfriend before. I wondered about her and what kind of person she might be. If David liked her, she must be wonderful, but I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and concern. When we finally met Olivia, she had long hair and a lovely personality. She greeted us warmly. Hello, I'm Olivia, she said, her smile radiating like summer sunshine. I thought to myself, she's too wonderful to be with David. Paul was equally impressed. She's incredible, really charming, Paul murmured. Olivia, sensing his praise, hugged him and said, I'm so glad you said that. I hope we can get even closer from now on. Her behavior surprised me, and even David seemed taken aback. Paul looked slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry if I was too forward, Olivia said with a smile, stepping back. I sometimes get close to people without realizing it. My friends always point it out, and though I try to be mindful, she laughed apologetically. Her initial behavior was surprising, but seeing the way David's eyes lit up when he spoke of her made it clear how much he loved her. Olivia isn't great with personal space, but that's part of her charm, David explained. She naturally brings people close, making even someone as shy as me enjoy the conversation. Despite the initial shock, I felt she would be a warm and loving daughter-in-law. Time passed, and Olivia and David prepared for marriage, eventually registering their union. It warmed my heart to think about their future together. Then, shortly after their wedding, I came home to find unfamiliar women's shoes at the entrance. Inside, I saw Paul and Olivia together. Olivia greeted me with a smile. Welcome home, Kate. The living room was cluttered with empty cans and bottles. What's going on here? I asked, taken aback. Olivia explained, we bumped into each other on the way home and decided to have a drink together to strengthen our bond. With the finances tight this month, we thought it would be better to drink here rather than go out. I was surprised to see them drinking alone at home. I didn't want to intrude on their newlywed time, but I wondered why they hadn't just gone to David's place. Olivia, slightly tipsy, mentioned, our room's a bit messy, but this place is so clean and comfortable. Where was David? It seemed unusual for a new bride to be drinking alone at our house. I looked around, half expecting David to be hiding somewhere. Dave's been working late nights and feeling a bit lonely, Olivia explained, sensing my concern. I came downstairs to find Olivia with tears streaming down her face. Paul, his voice gentle, said, It's okay, Olivia. Talk to me if things get tough, as he patted her head reassuringly. Thank you, Paul, Olivia responded, her voice trembling. The scene felt surreal, like something out of a movie. I couldn't shake the odd, uncomfortable feeling that seemed to ripple through the room. Paul, Olivia is important to David. Maybe you should consider keeping a bit more distance, I suggested softly. Olivia, however, defended Paul with a smile. He's just worried about me, she said. I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. This was more than I expected, and I felt a wave of exhaustion from work wash over me. I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to take a bath. Please clean up, I said, longing for the solace of a warm bath. After soaking in the tub, surrounded by bubbles and the soothing scent of bath oil, I felt my mind drift far away. Once I emerged and dressed, I was surprised to find David, who was supposed to be driving home, already at the house, looking slightly tipsy. David, weren't you supposed to drive home? I asked, bewildered. He grinned, a bit unsteady. Olivia suggested we have a drink together, and I got pulled in. I've decided to stay here tonight. Hey, Mom, why not have a drink with your son? It's been a while, he said with enthusiasm. I felt uneasy with an unexpected overnight guest and Olivia's presence. I can drive you both home if you'd like, I offered, but David waved it off. You must be tired too. It's fine, we'll stay here. Amidst the awkwardness, I heard laughter. Glancing at Olivia, I caught a momentary glimpse of her staring at me intently. Her gaze made me uneasy, leaving me to wonder if I had misunderstood the situation. I tried to reassure myself, but little did I know that Olivia's grand plan was already in motion. The next morning, she arrived at my house first thing, repeatedly apologizing for her behavior. Her reaction seemed a bit excessive, but I understood where she was coming from. When I told her it was all right, she left, looking visibly relieved. However, that night, to my surprise, Olivia was back at my house again. David was nowhere to be seen, and Olivia seemed different from before, which made me worry. I'm sorry for coming again, she said, handing me a box of sweets. Paul also apologized, albeit sheepishly. I might have been a bit overexcited yesterday. Sorry about that. I figured if this would help them bond, I should forgive them for now. Both Olivia and Paul thanked me sincerely, but just when I thought I could feel more mentally exhausted, a new twist awaited. One day, Paul approached me with a grim expression. Can we talk? He asked. I chose the living room as our spot to chat. While waiting, I was stunned to see David and Olivia walk in. My shock was evident as I greeted them with a confused long time no see, but they only sat silently. The tense atmosphere hinted at some major news, making me increasingly anxious. Paul finally spoke, dropping a bombshell. From now on, this house will belong to Olivia. If you can't accept that, we might have to reconsider our relationship. Why are you saying this? I asked, my voice a mix of shock and confusion. Before I could process what was happening, Olivia shouted, You need to leave this house. I was utterly dumbfounded. Hold on, explain yourself. What do you mean giving the house to Olivia? Paul's cheeks flushed as he replied, You've always caused trouble for Olivia. You should have thought about this before it got too late. I was at a loss for words, struggling to understand the sudden and harsh turn of events. I felt a deep sense of injustice. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet Paul seemed unconvinced. Olivia, tearfully, told them how much I had hurt her, recounting her pain. She stood next to Paul, visibly trying to hold back her tears. David looked at me with a disapproving gaze, saying, I never imagined you'd do something like this, Mom. It's heartbreaking. Despite my attempts to explain, my words fell on deaf ears, and Olivia's tears continued to flow. Paul coldly announced, That's why we decided to go our separate ways. The three of us will live in this house. His words felt remarkably heartless. Why should I have to give my house to Olivia? I asked, my confusion evident. Paul replied, Olivia is deeply hurt. Demanding compensation is one way to address it, but I thought of a different approach. I know how much this house means to you, so by taking it, maybe you'll understand the impact of your behavior. I struggled to believe this was fair or true, as I had never been unkind to Olivia. Moreover, considering Olivia hadn't worked since getting married, a $3,000 monthly mortgage seemed unmanageable for her. When I pointed this out, Paul responded with a smile. The mortgage will be transferred to David's name. Given his salary and position, the transition should be smooth. I asked, Is it really that simple to transfer the mortgage? Paul nodded, explaining, Usually it's difficult, but David works at a reputable company, and I have connections at the bank where you have the mortgage. I'm confident it can be arranged. His assurances did little to ease my concerns. The atmosphere grew increasingly hostile, as if I was being forced to surrender my home. Despite repeating my stance, I couldn't understand why I was being blamed when I had done nothing to Olivia. I couldn't bear the thought of giving up my house. Paul and Olivia grew increasingly frustrated with my response, and the conversation felt unbearably tense. Olivia, who had been crying the whole time, finally spoke softly. "Kate, please understand. Think of the baby." She gently stroked her belly. David added, "It's true, Mom. Olivia is pregnant, and if she's under too much stress, it could harm the baby. You need to consider that." The revelation that Olivia was pregnant complicated things. No one wants to add stress during pregnancy, but being asked to surrender my home on such short notice was overwhelming. "Give me a moment to think," I said, retreating to my room. Lying on my bed, I was lost in thought when I noticed a long strand of hair on the pillow. No one in my family had hair like this. My heart raced with the unsettling thought of an affair. This realization only added to my confusion and distress. I felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare, hoping to wake up and find everything back to normal. Tears streamed down my face as I drifted off to sleep, wishing this turmoil was just a bad dream. Late that night, I was jolted awake by voices coming from the living room, not David and Olivia, but a cheerful Paul and Olivia. Their conversation, filled with laughter and casual banter, felt completely out of place. I heard Olivia say, "Oh, I really wanted to drink wine." Paul replied, "Remember, you have a baby now." Their carefree chatter weighed heavily on me, and my heart sank further with Olivia's recent behavior. Then an unmistakable sound, a kiss, echoed through the house. Olivia murmured, "Oh, Paul, what if David or Kate sees us? It would be so embarrassing." My mind spun in disbelief. What were they doing? My stomach churned as I realized the depth of their betrayal. They were likely planning to enjoy themselves while I was out of the house. The thought was sickening. The long hair was definitely Olivia's, and without saying a word, I lay there listening to their conversation, feeling a wave of nausea. The idea of staying in a house that now felt tainted by their actions was unbearable. I no longer wanted a home that brought me such feelings. The next morning, I resolved that I needed to move on. I emerged in front of the three of them, rubbing my tired eyes. I hadn't slept well in that bed, but I kept that to myself. "Have you finally made up your mind?" they asked, their faces hopeful. "I've decided to give up the house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Their expressions brightened immediately. "Great, let's move quickly with the ownership transfer. If the house is in my name, the mortgage inspection will be fine," David said excitedly. He seemed oblivious to the full extent of the situation. My heart ached for him, but I chose not to reveal the whole truth. He had always followed Olivia's lead, and I wasn't ready to shatter his trust in her. The next few days were a whirlwind of divorce proceedings and transferring home ownership. Finally, the paperwork was completed, and the house was officially under a new name. "There's no place for you here anymore," Paul said with a touch of sarcasm. "Grandma, it's time to leave." Olivia leaned in and whispered something into my ear. It stung a bit, but even without her comment, I was already resolved to leave. The house held countless memories, but given what had happened, I had no reason to stay. I knew my next actions would stir things up for this peculiar trio. The real drama was just beginning. A month passed, a time for me to gather my thoughts, and I found myself standing in front of that house again. I took a deep breath and hesitantly pressed the doorbell of the house I hadn't visited in so long. My heartbeat seemed to echo in the quiet. "Why are you here?" Paul's slightly annoyed voice reached my ears. It felt strange hearing his tone after so long. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice tight with emotion. "Why should I let you in?" Paul acted as if I were a distant memory. "It involves Olivia," I said, knowing that mentioning her name would soften his stance. I didn't enjoy bringing her up, but I knew it would make an impact. "Oh, look who's here," Paul said sarcastically. His words were legally accurate but still painful. "What do you want?" everyone asked, their eyes filled with suspicion. I took a deep breath and pulled a photo from my pocket. "Can you take a look at this?" I asked, as all eyes turned to the image. The photo showed Paul and Olivia on a date, looking happy and intimate. After the divorce, I had hired a private detective to monitor them discreetly. It wasn't long before I received pictures of their outings. "What's this about?" David's face changed instantly upon seeing the photo. "Where was this taken?" Paul exclaimed, clearly in shock. "What's the big deal?" Olivia interjected defensively. "We're just father-in-law and daughter-in-law. We were just enjoying ourselves." I smirked and pulled out my smartphone. Listen to this, I said, pressing play on a recording. Paul's voice came through clearly. Olivia, I really love you, followed by Olivia's voice, hushed and anxious. If you're too loud, someone will hear in the next room. The recording included sounds that resembled kisses. Paul and Olivia fell silent, their faces registering shock. Seizing the moment, I asked, Olivia, whose child are you carrying? David's expression turned to one of confusion and panic. Could it be my father's? He murmured. That's impossible, Olivia began, but her words faltered, catching in her throat. David's anger erupted, leading to a physical altercation with Paul. In the middle of their fight, Olivia cried out in pain, momentarily halting their clash. I seized that opportunity to speak. Haven't I always said I never bullied Olivia? I feel like she's hiding something from me. Maybe she's lying to David to get me out of the house. David looked utterly shocked by my accusation. I can't believe it, David said, his voice trembling with regret and disbelief. I feel so pathetic for doubting Mom. Why are you hiding? Tell me everything. His eyes burned with anger. For a moment, Paul and Olivia remained silent, their faces showing shock. David continued, There's so much evidence. We could even take this to court. The color drained from their faces as the gravity of the situation set in. Olivia began to speak through her tears. When David and I went on our first date, I really enjoyed it. But the first time I saw this house, I fell in love. My family home is so old, and I dreamed of living in a beautiful house like this. I got close to Paul for that reason. When we were introduced for marriage, I waited for Paul to return, and we had drinks alone. We became close, and it seems we planned to get you out of the house. Olivia's apologies were interspersed with tears. I'm so sorry. I got too greedy. I should have been honest from the start about wanting to live together. Her voice carried a hint of regret. In my family, my mom and grandma always argued. I was scared of living with a mother-in-law. This house is so beautiful and comfortable. I was hoping you'd leave. Her admission of the affair with her father-in-law was deeply unsettling. Paul took a deep breath, trying to explain. Every time I saw her smile, I knew she was using me, but the time we spent together felt so good. Still, it's unforgivable. David's response was brief but carried a heavy weight. His eyes were filled with betrayal, sadness, and anger. Both Paul and Olivia were left speechless, tears streaming down their faces. It was no surprise when David decided to divorce, and a DNA test later confirmed Paul was the father of the baby. I never thought this day would come, David murmured softly. I gently stroked his head, reflecting on how our family had changed because of Olivia. It seemed she hadn't fully grasped how her choices would impact her future. I had a feeling that, with time, my premonitions would come true. 2 years later, on a sunny day, Olivia remarried Paul and started a new life with him under the same roof. Their children went to a nearby daycare, and Olivia tried to make friends with other mothers, though she often felt isolated. Her family's resistance to her divorce from David and her remarriage to Paul had strained their relationship. Their anger towards Paul remained intense, and family gatherings were rare. Meanwhile, the big, beautiful house now quietly stood, occupied only by David. He found solace in the memories of the past and hopes for the future. I've thought about selling this house, but my mother grew up here. I can't easily part with such a cherished home, David said, looking into the distance. He had cleaned and sorted out everything Paul and Olivia had left behind. With a hint of embarrassment, he added, If I had known you'd go through all this trouble, I wouldn't have said anything. I know it's not right to blame them, but I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you can forgive me, but please feel free to visit the house once in a while. I'd like us to share more together. He handed me a voucher for a resort hotel. I was deeply moved by his warm gesture and nearly brought to tears. Though I couldn't forget everything immediately, I wanted to rebuild our relationship slowly over time. I don't have any money to give you, I said firmly, looking at my husband, Kevin. He barely acknowledged my words, his eyes gleaming with a self-centered excitement. I'm going to stay with her when she turns 20, he declared, referring to his mistress. My heart ached as I looked at him. Kevin, who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, was in need of treatment, but all he could think about was leaving me for someone else. I had forgiven him so many times for his habitual infidelity, always for the sake of our daughter Amy. It felt cruel to rip her away from her father when she was so attached to him. After you and your parents die, all the property will be mine, he said bluntly, almost giddy at the thought of inheriting the insurance money and the real estate my family owned. He had no shame, no empathy for my suffering, but he didn't realize he would be the one to lose everything in the end. I'm 37 now, living with Kevin and our daughter Amy. We met through work and I was charmed by his smooth talk and easy manner. Without realizing it, I fell for him, and after dating for a while, we got married. My family was wealthy, owning multiple properties, but I had kept that a secret from Kevin to protect myself from opportunists. When he finally saw my family home for the marriage introduction, he was shocked. Kevin had seemed different from the others. He was genuinely pleased upon discovering the truth, and my parents, happy with him, even promised us a house as a gift when he became their son-in-law. It felt like the perfect beginning. Kevin was sweet, and every day after our wedding was filled with happiness. But it didn't last. "Kevin, I'm pregnant," I announced 6 months into our marriage, beaming with joy. "Oh, is that so?" he replied with barely a flicker of excitement. His reaction confused me, but I dismissed it. Soon, he began coming home late more and more often. I was suffering from morning sickness and eventually had to stop working, so I questioned his late returns. "I'm just busy with work," he would say curtly. I believed him, trying to cope with household duties and preparing for our baby's arrival. Even after Amy was born, nothing changed. Kevin continued to come home late, never helping with chores or caring for our daughter. I convinced myself he was just overwhelmed with work, but I was drowning in the responsibilities of motherhood. By the time Amy started elementary school, I was accustomed to doing everything on my own. Then one night, while Kevin was in the bath, I saw a notification flash on his phone, a message from a woman, filled with heart emojis. My heart sank. When I confronted him, he sneered. "How dare you snoop? That's low," he shot back. "So, you've been cheating," I said, my voice trembling. "I wondered why you always came home late." "So what?" Kevin shrugged, his tone indifferent. "Are you planning to divorce me?" I couldn't believe his casual response. He didn't care at all about what he had done to our family. Before I could say more, Amy walked into the room, her face worried. "Mommy, what's going on?" she asked, clearly having heard the argument. "Did I wake you?" "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Do you love Daddy?" I asked her. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Would you be sad if Daddy wasn't here?" "Yeah, I'd be really sad," she said softly. I felt tears stain my eyes. Kevin's betrayal hurt, but Amy's love for her father was pure. How could I tear our world apart by divorcing him? Faced with Kevin's callousness and Amy's innocent attachment to him, I found myself unable to leave. I bit my lip, knowing I would have to endure. Kevin's behavior didn't change. He continued staying out late, clearly spending time with his mistress. But on his days off, he was the perfect father, playing with Amy and showering her with affection. I lacked the strength to initiate a divorce, and as Amy grew older and busier with school and extracurriculars, life continued in a monotonous routine. Now, Amy is in middle school, and our lives are even more hectic. My mornings are filled with packing lunches, ironing her martial arts uniform, and handling an endless list of daily chores. I throw myself into taking care of Amy, keeping my mind occupied so I can avoid thinking about the man who shattered our marriage. I suddenly felt nauseous and rushed to the bathroom, vomiting up my meal. "Are you okay, Mom?" Amy asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm just feeling a bit under the weather," I reassured her, trying to smile. "I'll be fine after some rest. You go ahead and get to school." After she left, I lay down for a bit, hoping the rest would help. I assumed it was just a minor stomach issue, but as the days passed, the pain grew worse. My husband didn't come home again last night, as usual. For Amy's sake, I pushed through, trying to keep up with the household chores despite the growing pain, but eventually, I hit my limit. I went to see a doctor who told me they'd contact me with the results later. The pain became unbearable. I couldn't do any chores. All I could manage was to lie in bed. That's when Kevin finally came home. "Must be nice, lying around all day and skipping the chores," he said coldly, oblivious to my suffering. The scent of another woman's perfume lingered on him. Anger and sadness washed over me, but I had no energy to confront him. A few days later, the hospital called. "Please come in with a family member for the results," they said. "Can't I come alone?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We prefer you bring someone with you," was their gentle reply. When I asked Kevin to come with me, he scoffed. "Impossible," he said, brushing me off without a second thought. He didn't come home that night either, leaving me to face this alone. Reluctantly, I asked my parents to accompany me to the hospital. The doctor greeted us with a grave expression. "You have stomach cancer," he said, his voice steady but serious. "It has spread to other organs. It's stage 4. We need to begin treatment immediately." Stage 4. That means it's terminal, right? I asked, barely able to get the words out. The doctor nodded solemnly. "Yes, but we need to act quickly to extend your life." Everything around me went still. My thoughts froze. Amy had just started middle school this spring. I was supposed to watch her grow, be there for her milestones, her firsts. But now, would I even get to see those moments? Overwhelmed by shock, I couldn't hold back my tears. When I got home, Amy returned from school and saw me crying. She ran over immediately. "Mom, why are you crying?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said, trying to compose myself. "I have to go to the hospital. I'll need to stay there for a while." "What?" she said, her eyes welling up. I gently explained my illness, and soon Amy was crying too. The pain of seeing her like that was almost worse than the cancer itself. When Kevin finally came home and I told him about the diagnosis, his only reaction was mild surprise. No concern, no comfort. "How bad is it?" he asked flatly. "In the worst case, 6 months. But treatment could extend that," I said, exhausted from both the conversation and the situation. I didn't even have the energy to be angry at his detached response. All I could think about was preparing for the hospital stay, and how I'd fight to hold on, for Amy's sake. I took care of signing all the documents, arranged the housework, and handled the insurance procedures before being admitted to the hospital. I entrusted Kevin with taking care of our home and Amy. "Please look after the house and Amy," I asked, hoping for a sincere response. Yeah, he muttered, not even making eye contact with me. Days passed without a single visit from him. I quietly spent my time in the hospital, trying to keep my mind off the pain. One afternoon, just as I was about to lie down after lunch, Kevin suddenly appeared in my hospital room, looking hurried. "What's going on?" I asked, surprised by his sudden appearance. "I finished dealing with the insurance," he said, a smug look on his face. "I didn't realize cancer insurance paid out so much just for being hospitalized." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Kevin smirked. "I'm going to take paid leave starting tomorrow and go on a trip." "What?" My voice shook with disbelief. "You won't be around much longer anyway," he said coldly. "You won't need all this insurance money. I'm going to use it to travel with my girlfriend. She's 20 and she's been wanting to go to Cancun." I stared at him in shock. "Wait a minute, that money is for my treatment costs. What about Amy?" "I'm not wasting money on someone with no future," he said, his tone heartless. "As for Amy, why don't you ask your parents to take care of her? Thanks for the money, though." I was speechless. Kevin had checked the insurance payout and taken it for himself, planning to use it for a trip with the woman he was having an affair with. My stomach ached, but it wasn't just from the cancer. It was from an utter betrayal. True to his word, Kevin left for his trip with his mistress, leaving me behind in the hospital. My parents and Amy came to visit, furious at what he had done. I felt indescribable frustration. Not only had he abandoned me, but he also stole the money meant for my treatment to enjoy an overseas trip with his lover. It was unforgivable. When I was first told my cancer was at stage 4, all I felt was despair. But now, a new resolve burned within me. I couldn't give up. My anger toward Kevin turned into a vow of revenge. He never visited, and I had no idea where he was or what he was doing. Meanwhile, Amy never went back to live with him, and it seemed he didn't care about losing contact with her either. But every day, Amy visited me after school, and my parents stood by me, offering support. It was their warmth and strength that helped me endure the grueling treatments. Their love was the only thing that kept me going. Finally, the day came when I was discharged from the hospital. I expressed my heartfelt thanks to the nurses and doctors who had cared for me, and with Amy by my side, I headed home. After being hospitalized for a month and a half, I missed my home dearly. Walking through the door with Amy's support, I felt both relief and determination. I was home, and I was ready to reclaim my life. When I arrived home and opened the front door, I was greeted by the sight of shoes, Kevin's, and a pair that clearly belonged to a woman I didn't recognize. "What's this?" Amy muttered under her breath, her tone filled with discontent. Even though she was just in middle school, she was old enough to understand that Kevin was cheating. She also knew just how wrong it was. "Wait here for me, okay?" I said softly. I didn't want to expose her to any more pain than she had already been through. Confronting Kevin and the woman he was with was something I could handle on my own. Leaving Amy at the entrance, I stepped into the house alone and raised my voice deliberately. I'm home. I've returned. Kevin appeared from the bedroom, hurriedly adjusting his clothes, his expression a mix of shock and annoyance. The kitchen was a mess, empty noodle cups, ready meal boxes, and alcohol cans scattered everywhere, far more than one person could consume. What are you doing here? Kevin stammered, clearly caught off guard. After sending Amy to stay with her grandparents, he must have thought he had free rein to bring his mistress home. I came back because I was discharged from the hospital. But what is this? What's going on here? And who is she? A young woman emerged slowly from the bedroom, her outfit barely more than lingering, her makeup smudged and messy. You told me your wife wouldn't be coming back, she said, looking at Kevin with confusion. You said this was your house, didn't you? I stared at them both, trying to contain my rising anger. This house was handed down to me by my parents, I said firmly. It's my house. It's not strange for me to come back to my own home. The woman shot Kevin a puzzled look. But you told me this was your house. Kevin, ever the show-off, scoffed and waved his hand dismissively. Ah, but it's practically my house now, he said, clearly trying to maintain his charade in front of her. Why would this house be yours? I asked, narrowing my eyes at him. Kevin smirked, the arrogance in his voice palpable. Because you won't be around much longer. Once you're gone, as your husband, everything becomes mine, your inheritance, all of it. I'll get the insurance payout too. With that money, I'll travel wherever I want, buy whatever I want. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He had already written me off, assuming that once I was gone, he'd live a carefree life with my inheritance and insurance money. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. But I wasn't done yet. I like that. Sounds great. I want an Hermes bag, the young woman exclaimed, her voice giddy with excitement. Don't worry, I'll buy you anything, Kevin responded, clearly pleased by her enthusiasm. The sight of a man in his 40s fawning over a 20-year-old was beyond ridiculous. But I had reached my limit. You won't be getting a single penny, I said, my voice cutting through their conversation. Kevin turned to me, confused. What are you talking about? I changed the beneficiary of my insurance from you to Amy. So no, you won't be cashing in on anything. His smug expression faltered for a moment before he laughed mockingly. Are you serious? Amy's a minor. As her legal guardian, I'll get the money. Everything will still be mine in the end. Besides, your parents are loaded. Once they're gone, their inheritance will come to me too. That'd be amazing. We could live it up, right? His arrogance was staggering. He actually believed that he could inherit my family's wealth after my death and my parents'. But I had no intention of continuing this marriage any longer. Without hesitation, I pulled out a stack of documents from my bag. Take a look at these, I said, handing them over. They're from the court. Could you sign and return them as soon as possible? I want this divorce finalized quickly. Kevin's face twisted in shock. Wait, what? I didn't hear anything about a divorce. That's why I'm telling you now, I replied, calm but firm. If you prefer that woman, then both of you should leave. I have no reason to stay in this marriage anymore. His expression darkened. So, you're just throwing me out now. What about this house? I'm your husband, your son-in-law. I have a right to it. And what happens to Amy if we get divorced? Without me, and eventually without you, she'll be all alone. I've already arranged for my parents to take care of Amy if anything happens to me. I said coolly. You've neglected both of us long enough. And as for my parents, they won't be around forever. But Amy will have their support. She doesn't need someone like you dragging her down. Kevin's face turned red, his hands shaking with frustration. Don't act all high and mighty with me. You really think you're just going to cut me out? After everything? Yes, I said, unwavering. Being with someone as unfaithful and selfish as you would be the real pity. Amy deserves better than to grow up in a house full of lies and neglect. Kevin sputtered, trying to come up with a retort. That's not true. Amy's still in middle school. She needs me. She doesn't need you, I said, my voice firm. She needs stability, love, and a future without deception. And that's what I'm going to give her. She likes me and would be devastated if we divorced. You're her mother. If you really care about Amy, you shouldn't go through with this, Kevin said with a smug expression as if he had me cornered. It was the same tactic he'd used before, manipulating my love for Amy to make me hesitate about divorce. For years, I had clung to the belief that staying together was better for her, assuming she admired Kevin as a father. But who was the one that abandoned his middle school daughter to go on a trip with another woman? "Hey," Kevin suddenly yelled, his voice so loud that Amy, still waiting at the entrance, must have heard everything. The realization that she was within earshot took him by surprise. He didn't expect to be caught. "I don't want a dad who flirts with younger women and ignores his wife," Amy said, stepping forward, her voice filled with disgust. "Hey, Amy, it's not what it looks like," Kevin stammered, desperately trying to save face. "Please leave. This is my and Mom's house," Amy said firmly. Kevin's face fell. "Wait, think about it. Your mom's not going to be around much longer. This house is too big for just you two. We can live together, and a young mom would be nice, right?" The woman standing beside him looked awkward, realizing the conversation had taken a serious turn. "Ha! I'm not interested in being anyone's mother," the woman interjected. "Didn't you say you'd send your daughter away?" "Stop it," I snapped. "Now you're lying in front of her." Kevin's voice faltered. "Amy, you still like me, don't you?" "No way, that's disgusting," Amy said coldly. Her words struck him silent. It was disgusting, bringing in a mistress and talking about a new mom while I was still battling an illness. "Kevin," I began, my voice steady but resolute, "you're making a huge mistake. And just so you know, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." He blinked, clearly taken aback. "What? But you said it was terminal cancer." "It was terminal. But surgery removed most of the cancer, and chemotherapy and radiation have worked better than expected. I'm still being monitored, but for now, the cancer is in remission. I'm not going anywhere for a long time." I hadn't heard that. "You didn't bother asking," I said sharply. "I told you there was hope. You just never listened. I could get better, but you weren't listening, were you? Why do you think I was discharged if things were so hopeless?" I said, glaring at him. "I thought you wanted to spend your last moments at home," Kevin muttered weakly. I scoffed. "What a conveniently selective memory you have. Unfortunately for you, this house belongs to me, and I'll be living here from today. So, could you leave right now?" "Wait, just hold on a minute," Kevin said, his voice rising in desperation. "There's no need to rush into this. We should reconsider the divorce. What happened with her was just a fling, and I'll cut ties with her. Let's start over. It's not too late." I glanced at Amy. Her face showed a mix of shock and disbelief. "You really think we can just start over?" I asked, unable to believe his audacity. "I have no intention of going back to how things were." "Don't say that." Kevin dropped to his knees, grabbing my feet as if begging for mercy. "I'll never have an affair again. I'll stop seeing other women. Please, let's give it another chance." The woman standing nearby looked disgusted by his sudden plea, her interest clearly fading as his desperation became obvious. I shook my head. "Do you really think I want a divorce just because of the affair?" "Then what else could it be?" he asked, genuinely confused. I sighed, the weight of everything pressing on me. "I've reached a point where I don't care if you see other women. The real issue is that when your family faced a life-threatening illness, not only did you fail to worry, but you spent the money meant for my treatment on a vacation. You're not just an unfaithful husband, you're a selfish, heartless man who's toxic for Amy's future. So please leave." "But how will you survive if you can't work? You're too sick. How will you make a living?" he stammered, trying to grasp any excuse to hold on. "I have insurance, and the money will be deposited into my account next week. So no, there's nothing for you," I said coldly. His face turned pale. That won't do. I spent everything on the trip. I was counting on your hospital fees for the next payout. I don't have the $155,000 I used, and if I lose the house, I'll have nowhere to live. My life will be ruined." "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, unmoved. "You ruined it yourself." I hoped Kevin might reconsider the divorce, but my decision was firm. "Unfortunately, my mind is made up." "Leave, Amy, can't you ask your mom to think this over?" Kevin pleaded. "No, I don't want to see your face anymore," I said, resolute. With those words, Amy, now stronger and more assertive from her martial arts training, pushed Kevin and the other woman out the front door. Even though he was much older, he was no match for her strength. I watched with a mixture of pride and amusement as Amy, who had grown into a formidable young woman, managed to drag him along. The sight of Kevin's pitiful state made me smile. The commotion attracted the attention of the police, who arrived shortly after a neighbor's report. They quickly escorted Kevin and his companion away. As I watched them leave, I couldn't help but laugh at their absurdity. A year has passed and I have miraculously overcome cancer. My health has fully recovered and there has been no recurrence. I've returned to work in a simple clerical position. Despite my parents insisting that I didn't need to work, I felt uncomfortable sitting idle and wanted to contribute to the household finances, so I've been helping out with chores around the house. Meanwhile, Kevin's life had taken a turn for the worse. Abandoned by his affair partner and burdened with massive debt, he had squandered my treatment funds and inheritance on a lavish lifestyle. Now, he struggled to repay a debt nearing $65,000. I learned this through mutual acquaintances, as Kevin and I used to work at the same place. His financial irresponsibility and poor habits had led to weight gain and loss of interest from women, leaving him leading a lonely life. Given that Amy expressed a strong desire to leave her old home, sickened by memories of Kevin and the other woman, we decided to move back to my parents' house. The property was sold for a good price due to its location, providing us with enough funds to live comfortably without working for a while. I had received numerous requests for financial help from Kevin, but I found them intrusive and blocked his calls. Today, Amy competed in a martial arts tournament, where her skills have continued to impress. "I want to become strong to protect Mom," she said with determination. I cheered her on. "Good luck, Amy." The tension in the venue was palpable as the match began. Amy executed a flawless throw and won the championship. "How should we celebrate?" I asked. "Let's stay up late and watch a movie," Amy suggested. "Sounds good. I'll grab some popcorn," I agreed. I've been wanting to see that movie. As we left the venue, I couldn't help but worry about the challenges of being a single mother, especially during Amy's sensitive middle school years. But despite everything, Amy has grown into a remarkably honest and straightforward person, surpassing my expectations. I have no regrets about divorcing Kevin. In fact, the ordeal has strengthened the bond between Amy and me. Though there is still a risk of recurrence and future challenges, with Amy by my side, I am confident we can face and overcome any obstacle together. I filed for divorce. I'll be taking the house and the car. I know it will be tough, but hang in there. I'm not sure how much time you have left, but I hope you can push through. It might sound like kind words, but in reality, they were sharp and cutting. His smile at that moment hurt me more than anything. How could he do this to me? Leave me when I'm sick? Wasn't our promise to face challenges together? I can't stop crying from the shock of his words and attitude. There's no way I can forgive him. I intend to make him feel my pain, even if my body can't bear it anymore. This firm determination signals the start of my next step, a journey of revenge. My name is Anna. At 45, I've always been a dedicated housewife, taking care of my family. I used to enjoy every day with my husband, Tom, just like old times. We met through a friend's introduction. He's always been sociable, able to connect with anyone. When I was nervous at first, he reached out to me with a warm smile, and I quickly opened up. Our days together were as sweet as colorful candies, so delightful that I'd lose track of time. I genuinely wanted to spend even more time with him, and maybe he felt the same, cherishing our moments together too. It's hard to believe now, but we loved each other deeply and promised to marry. Living with him felt like a dream. Every day sparkled, and I believe we always share smiles in the future. But as time went on, Tom began to change, likely due to the stress from his job. His salary isn't that high, he didn't pursue specialized qualifications in school, and lacks a strong academic background, which limited his job choices. I suggested trying a new job a few times, but he always responded reluctantly, "I'm good for now." While I'm working full-time and we don't have any financial issues, I worried about what would happen if we had a child or if I got sick and couldn't work. To alleviate this anxiety, I made a suggestion. "Tom, my company's short-staffed in administration. You don't need any special qualifications, just the basics. Interested?" One day, a friend from my company's HR told me about an opening in administration. I thought he might be interested and suggested it, believing it could be a good opportunity to improve his challenging job situation. But his reaction was cold. "Why are you making decisions about my job without asking me? I chose this place myself. Are you saying there's something wrong with it?" I was taken aback. I had simply made a suggestion out of concern for his future. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you with that sudden proposal. I just thought the conditions at your current job seemed tough, and maybe this company would be a better fit for you. But he didn't take it that way. Just because you're my wife doesn't mean you can interfere in my career decisions as if you were a stranger. I have my own thoughts, you know. As he walked away, I murmured to myself. The word stranger resonated deeply. I am his wife, and we are a family, yet his words and attitude felt like they were meant for someone else. A crack was growing between us, widening rapidly. Tom had also been harsh with my family. My mother, a truly kind person, would regularly visit our home while I was away for work. She cleaned and cooked delightful meals, storing them in the refrigerator as her way of checking in on us. I was grateful for her kindness. I often invited my mother over for dinner, but lately, Tom seemed increasingly irritated by her presence. When he came home and saw her in the living room, he'd snap, "You're here again." Both my mother and I were taken aback by his remark. It made me question the state of our relationship and our future. How could we bridge the growing gap between us? My mother, with a gentle smile, said, "It's all right, Anna. If my presence makes you uncomfortable, I apologize. I'll leave earlier today." Hearing her say that, especially when she's always gone out of her way to help us despite her busy schedule, was heart-wrenching. "Tom, please think about how Mom feels," I pleaded. "She's always looking out for us. Please show her a little respect." Tears welled up in my eyes, changing the room's atmosphere. I remembered all the times my mother had brightened our home and couldn't understand why Tom would speak to her that way. When I come home after working hard every day, all I want is to relax. It's exhausting to have someone else around all the time in my own house. I tried to understand Tom's perspective, but I couldn't shake the appreciation I felt for my mother. Honestly, I didn't think I was wrong. It felt like Tom was being stubborn, but I wasn't sure how to express my feelings in a way he'd understand. My mother said, "Don't worry about it. If everyone's happy, that's all that matters to me," and gave me a comforting smile. Her warm words filled me with overwhelming guilt. That night, as I enjoyed the delicious meal she had cooked, my emotions were a jumble of appreciation and remorse. I couldn't stop thinking about Tom. I spent countless nights pondering how our relationship could improve, but a much larger challenge emerged at work. I suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. Thankfully, my colleagues acted quickly, calling an ambulance and rushing me to a nearby major hospital. The medical tests started, but everything seemed like a blur. I tried to reach Tom, but he didn't respond. Then I received the diagnosis: cancer. Fortunately, it was caught early, and with proper treatment, the doctors said I'd be okay. Still, I knew cancer treatments could be grueling, so I steeled myself for the long and challenging road ahead. I told Tom about the diagnosis and my hospitalization, but his response was indifferent. His silence made me feel incredibly lonely, yet I chose to focus on my treatment, believing that moving forward was the only option. The cancer treatment was tougher than I'd imagined. My health deteriorated rapidly, forcing me to stay in bed most of the time. One day, amidst this struggle, Tom finally appeared in my hospital room. "How are you feeling?" he asked casually. "Well, it's pretty rough," I replied, half jokingly. "It might have been a bit easier if you were by my side." To be honest, I was frustrated by his attitude. Why hadn't he come sooner? His support could have made a world of difference during these trying times. Instead of feeling relieved about our reunion, I was left feeling more isolated. I found myself increasingly irritated as I reflected on our past. Then, what Tom said next left me genuinely shocked and stunned. "I filed for divorce. I'll take the house and the car. I know it's tough, but hang in there. I don't know how much time you have left, but I hope you keep fighting." "Wait, are you serious?" I exclaimed. "Divorce?" A storm of questions raged within me. Didn't we promise to always stay together? I always believed that true couples would overcome challenges together. Tom's words confused me and left me feeling detached. I whispered to myself, "I don't need him anymore. I'll move forward on my own. I'll just forget about him." I decided that he would regret underestimating me, but first I needed to end our relationship properly. "I get it. I'm sorry for everything. Keep the house, the car, whatever. If you want compensation money, I'll pay. Thanks for everything," I said. Tom looked surprised at first, but soon his expression shifted to a smug smile. "I didn't expect you to accept it so easily. I thought you'd throw a tantrum. Anyway, Take care of yourself and don't bother inviting me to your funeral." As I watched him leave the room, a smile spread across my face. He didn't realize he had walked right into my trap. It would be interesting to see how his life changed now. I called a colleague from a company I knew. "Hello, long time no talk. I have a favor to ask. Can you help?" At first, he sounded surprised, but once I explained, he agreed. "All right, let's give it a try." Everything was set. Imagining Tom's shocked and anxious face made me smirk. This new sense of excitement even boosted my motivation for my medical treatment. A few days passed, and one afternoon after my treatment, I noticed that my cell phone had received 200 missed calls from Tom. The thrill of waiting for his call was oddly satisfying. Once I calmed down, I called him back and heard his shaky voice on the other end. "Anna, help me. I never expected this," he pleaded. Imagining his distressed tone made me chuckle. This was exactly what I had planned. Trying to sound concerned, I said, "Tom, tell me what happened." He took a deep breath before saying, "My name's on the company's layoff list. I can't believe this is happening." Listening to his panicked voice, I smirked, knowing everything was unfolding just as I had orchestrated. The person I had contacted was the head of sales at our company. I had asked him to reconsider the business dealings with Tom's company. Initially confused, he reviewed the transaction history and decided it was best to choose a different partner. That's why Tom's company started calling me. That's when I decided to reveal something I had kept to myself. "You know, there are rumors in your company about you and the new girl. Everyone likes her because she's so cheerful, and there are whispers about an affair. Is that true?" I could hear disbelief in Tom's voice. "Are you serious?" "You can't be serious. This has to be a joke." His surprise was understandable. After all, who would think an ordinary employee could influence his work? "Well, actually," I said, "I'm the CEO of this company." There was a pause. I could tell Tom was speechless on the other end. "It's no lie," I continued. "That's how we've been living so comfortably. My annual income is around $1 million. Your regular salary wouldn't have been enough to support your shopping habits." The truth was, Tom's spending habits were out of control. The $1,400 allowance he received from me was like a second salary, yet it was never enough. He rushed out and approached me with a pleading tone. "Can I have a little more?" At this rate, the money he receives from me might end up surpassing his actual salary. Most people would have abandoned such a luxurious lifestyle for something more stable. But since I earn $1 million a year, giving Tom a $1,400 allowance each month isn't a big deal for me. I've always wondered what he spent that money on. "Tom, yesterday was payday, wasn't it?" I asked. "I've always given you extra money on payday, but that might be difficult from now on. We're not a couple anymore, and it's only natural that you can't expect that monthly allowance since we're divorced." I wondered how he would manage from now on. "Oh, and be careful with the mortgage on the house. It's $2,000 a month. I know it'll be tough, but you'll need to manage it well. If you're late with the payment, you might have to leave the house." While a $2,000 loan isn't a burden for me, it's a significant amount for Tom. From his reaction, it was clear he was confused and in disbelief, repeatedly saying things like, "Really? And that's crazy." What I said was the truth. This is the result of my efforts to maintain our relationship, yet he took advantage of me when I was by his side, pursuing only his own desires. Maybe it's time he faced the consequences of his actions. Why did it come to this? I've been laid off and now have to figure out how to get by. How am I going to pay the rent this month? Despair was evident in his voice. He must have felt lost and uncertain about how to move forward. If I were in his position, I find it hard to imagine a brighter future. I understood that Tom's situation must be overwhelming and confusing, but it was a direct result of his past disrespectful behavior. If he had shown genuine care for me and my family, things wouldn't have turned out this way. This is the consequence of his choices. Had he truly respected us, he wouldn't be facing such troubles. Tom remained silent, perhaps at a loss for words. I felt a mix of pity and amusement. Was this it? Could I hang up now? Just then, he spoke in a panicked voice. "Wait, can we reconsider our relationship one more time? I know it sounds selfish, but I realize now how important you were to me." The idea of starting over with him made my heart race. After all the pain he caused me and how he abandoned me, the thought of going back felt daunting. He took a deep breath. "I know I've been reckless lately, and I'm really sorry I couldn't visit you in the hospital more often. But once you're better, let's go somewhere peaceful and have a relaxing time together. I want to see your smile again." His words felt nostalgic, reminiscent of what he said when he proposed. He promised a life filled with laughter and happiness. Back then, I was so swept up by his words that I jumped into the relationship without thinking. Married life, however, proved difficult, especially with his reckless spending habits. Maybe if I had understood him better, things could have been different. Tom's voice grew weaker. "Anna, I can't live without you. I want to be by your side and face life's challenges together. Can we start fresh, just one more time?" His voice was filled with sadness and a hint of desperation. Despite the emotion, it was hard to trust him after everything that had happened. "Stop it already, we're done. I've chosen a new path, and I can't go back," I said firmly. There was a trace of sorrow in his voice, but I could sense he genuinely wanted me back. "Please let me say one last thing. I truly love you, Anna. If you ever change your mind, I'll be here." I could have been swayed by his words, but I had made a decision about my future and our relationship. I wouldn't be influenced by his sweet talk any longer. Enough. Words like that will change my mind. Think about it. Don't you have another girlfriend? Shouldn't you focus on her? I knew about Tom's new relationship from information provided by his boss. His declarations of love now seemed hollow. I realized he'd say anything convenient to get what he wanted. It was frustrating that he only reached out when he needed something and turned away when times got tough. We couldn't be together anymore. Spend quality time with her and forget about me. I won't be reaching out, but if you need to contact me, speak to my lawyer. Take care of yourself, Tom. His pleas seemed sincere, but letting him go would probably mean his life would become more difficult. That was his choice. I had my own life to move forward with. I wanted him to stand on his own 2 feet. I hung up and adjusted my settings to block any further contact from him. According to my lawyer, Tom repeatedly tried to reach me. My decision was firm, so the lawyer respected it and provided no details about me. Unexpectedly, my lawyer suggested pursuing damages. Initially, I hadn't considered it, but it seemed like a way to seek compensation. I knew Tom and his new partner weren't wealthy. There were rumors about his serious debts. Upon investigating his affair partner, I found she had fled due to financial issues. When I contacted her family, they were furious and had her working hard at home. Actions always have consequences, and it seemed they were facing theirs. I had overcome cancer and made a full recovery. My speedy recovery even surprised the doctors. Returning to the office, I found a letter on my desk from the supportive sales manager. His heartwarming words touched me. When colleagues heard I was single again, some kindly offered to set me up. But after my past marriage, I wanted to cherish my time and focus on myself for now. "Since I'm getting remarried, you'll need to move out. The $55,000 loan will be covered by my new partner," he said, his voice dripping with irony. Years of painstakingly working to pay off that loan left me stunned by his audacity to shift the burden onto his new wife. "Then, I guess the $5,000 monthly payments will be your responsibility now," I replied, making clear the true amount I had been shouldering all along. "Sign the divorce papers without delay," I continued, "and just leave. Whatever comes next, even if it's hell, doesn't matter to me anymore." I'm Meg Smith, a 41-year-old housewife who works part-time. My husband Mike is 3 years older than me, and we've been married for 10 years. We first met while working at the same company. Back then, I was deeply engrossed in my career and had little interest in marriage or romance. However, after turning 30, a colleague who was contemplating going independent persuaded me to switch jobs. Just as I was starting to settle into my new role, Mike, a senior colleague from my old company, confessed his love for me. From the start, my relationship with Mike, who was in his mid-30s, was viewed through the lens of marriage. However, 2 years later, we tied the knot, largely due to pressure from those around us. My in-laws were incredibly supportive, treating me like their own daughter, which allowed me to continue working without concerns. A year after our marriage, we built a house that reflected our dreams and desires. Although it was a significant investment, we secured a loan with a manageable repayment plan. This major purchase solidified our commitment to supporting each other. For the first 2 years, we lived as a typical working couple. However, in our 3rd year of marriage, as we began contemplating starting a family, Mike dropped the bombshell that he wanted to leave his job to start his own business. He had always dreamed of launching his business before turning 40 and had been quietly building his network and saving money. While the future of his venture was uncertain, his resolve was unwavering. By the time I discovered his plans, he had already resigned from his job. I felt disheartened by the lack of communication between us, especially since he seemed to assume that my income alone would cover our needs. Shortly after Mike launched his business, my father-in-law fell ill and was hospitalized. It became clear that returning to his previous lifestyle was no longer feasible, and his home would need extensive renovations for his post-discharge needs. Although my in-laws insisted they could manage on their own, Mike decided that our family would cover all the expenses. I wanted to support my in-laws as much as possible, so I agreed to help, but covering the entire cost was a different story. Our household expenses surged, and I was left bewildered. Our income simply couldn't sustain such a large financial burden. Mike's business was struggling, with frequent contract cancellations and few new opportunities. His income had dwindled to nearly nothing, and I was left to handle all living expenses and loan payments with my salary. Despite being nearly unemployed, Mike remained indifferent to our financial strain, dismissing my concerns and treating the situation as if it were someone else's problem. Our credit card bills began to soar as Mike frequently went out drinking, claiming it was for client relations. Faced with the possibility of spending our lives just paying off loans, I suggested we either sell the house or shut down the struggling business. Mike dismissed my proposals, insisting, "We're not on the brink of ruin. This is a time to endure." The only reason we were managing it all was because of my salary, and I was the one bearing the brunt of our financial strain. Mike couldn't grasp this reality. Eventually, I felt it was pointless to discuss anything with him as long as payments were made on time. As the situation dragged on, our daily conversations dwindled. I knew Mike was spending time with other women under the guise of work, but I had become indifferent to him. One day, after returning from work, Mike finally spoke to me after a long silence. With a smirk, he waved a piece of paper in front of me and said, "I've decided to divorce you. Please sign here." I took a deep breath and responded calmly, accepting both his words and the divorce papers. It was likely because I had been contemplating proposing a divorce myself if he hadn't acted first. "Can we wait a moment? I just got home. Let's discuss this in the living room," I suggested. "I thought you wanted to talk, but now you're rushing me," he asked, his tone irritated. "I don't need any unnecessary conversation, just get it over with," he snapped back. Deliberately took my time moving to the living room, sensing Mike's growing impatience. I resented how everything was unfolding on his terms and decided to prolong the moment a bit longer. Regardless, the decision to divorce was made. The days we had spent together in the house we built with so much care were coming to an end. I wanted to savor these final moments at my own pace. As I settled on the sofa, I picked up the divorce papers once more. They seemed flimsy compared to the marriage registration we had signed a decade ago, possibly reflecting my current state of mind. "How long are you going to just stare at them?" Mike asked, his tone edged with irritation. "I have a question. What are your plans after the divorce?" "What do you mean? What am I going to do? Are you saying you're having second thoughts about the divorce?" "I'm going through with the divorce, but can we at least have a brief conversation before it's finalized? I'm planning to remarry, after all." "Remarrying, huh? So there's someone else. She must be young, attractive, and financially successful, unlike me, an old lady who didn't even have children with you. So you're planning to take advantage of her next." "Take advantage of her? What do you think of me?" "I'm simply laying out the facts. I've always handled the finances and you never had to worry about payments. Yet you act so superior. I can lead a better life without someone like you. The divorce is actually a favor for me." Sure. I'll brush off your bitter remarks as the ramblings of someone who's lost. Maybe I should have said more. "Keep talking. The divorce is final, and I won't have to see your face much longer. So please move out by the end of the week." "I'm leaving today. I can't stand hearing your voice any longer. By the way, does your new girlfriend know about the loans you're carrying?" "Of course she does. She's agreed to contribute $500 a month for living here. It's no big deal for her. She won't struggle with the loan payments like you did." Understood. After signing the divorce papers, I decided to leave with my belongings already packed. I'll leave the remaining furniture behind as part of the asset division. Dispose of it if you don't need it. Just go. And best wishes to your new girlfriend. Handling a $5,000 monthly loan payment will be challenging, but good luck. By the way, I've left a note detailing the loan information for her. With a smile, I handed Mike the note, got into my car, and drove away from my former home. I headed straight to City Hall to submit the divorce papers. I hadn't felt this relieved in a long time and thought I should have divorced sooner without worrying about him managing the loan payments. A week after the divorce, one morning, I received multiple calls from my ex-husband Mike. Though I had anticipated this, it was still quite irritating. I decided to address it and answered one of his calls. Yes, what do you want? I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important. That's quite rude, but is it true about the $5,000? I have no reason to lie. You're expecting me to cover your debt. I sighed deeply at his words. Maybe I should have explained everything more clearly instead of just relying on the note. Despite the inconvenience, all the details are laid out in that note. I thought you'd understand it if you read it. I'm calling because I still don't get it, even after reading. I'll break it down for you. Besides the mortgage on the house, there are the renovation costs for your parents' home that you chose, the personal loan for your father's medical expenses, the business loan for your venture, and the credit card debt you accrued, all under your name. If there were only a mortgage, I could have managed that, but there's much more. If you have doubts, you can verify it. I helped because I was your wife, but now that we're not, it's no longer my concern. I told you when I left that there's a monthly payment of $5,000. You must think this is a joke. You spent money like it was nothing. Did you ever consider these payments? Well, you'll have to deal with it with your new girlfriend. That's why you divorced me, right? Actually, she broke up with me. She said $5,000 a month is too much. I figured as much. It's understandable. Even someone with a high income would rarely agree to take on a $5,000 monthly payment for debts they didn't incur. No one wants to pay 10 times the value of a house over many years. Did you really earn that much after changing jobs? Yes, my salary increased fivefold after changing jobs, but all that income went straight to repayments. I didn't realize you were making so much. I wouldn't have suggested divorce if I had known. It's not that you didn't know, you just weren't interested. After I switched jobs, you never asked about my work or my salary. You should have brought it up yourself. You never discussed your income either, even when we worked together. You barely communicated. Once you went independent and had little to no income, yet continued to spend recklessly, I figured it was pointless to bring it up. Let's start over. Come back. I refuse. I finally achieved my freedom. Then what about the payments? $5,000 a month is unmanageable. Sell the house and use your income to pay off the remaining debt. You might be able to handle it if you adjust the repayment plan. Why not continue with the payments? I have no involvement with you anymore. I'm not interested in a stranger's debts. You're incredibly cold. Don't you have any empathy? I may seem cold, but I've been making substantial payments for over 6 years. Part of it was out of love for you, and part of it was because I felt obligated to your parents. If you wanted to come back, it might have been different. But you chose the divorce on your own. Technically, I have the right to sell the house, divide the assets, and even claim alimony for adultery. But I wanted to sever ties with you before dealing with that. I'm done with someone who turns their own money into a facade of wealth and squanders everything. I'm exhausted from covering your reckless debts. My life is my own now. Don't involve me in it any further. With that, I ended the call. Mike ceased to interfere in my life after that. The relief I felt when everything was finally settled was immense. Later, I learned that Mike had to give up his job and the house and create a new repayment plan for the loans. Returning to his previous job under the scrutiny of others must have been uncomfortable. Despite this, he would continue to be burdened by loan payments. I'd also heard that his parents decided to sell their house and move to a retirement home. It saddened me to think they wouldn't have faced such a choice if we hadn't divorced. I assisted with their move and contributed financially to their entry fees as a way to repay the kindness they had shown me. I hope they can now enjoy a peaceful life without the strain of $5,000 monthly payments. I can live comfortably by being naturally frugal, and my savings have steadily increased. I'm also looking into investing to secure my financial future. Currently, I'm moving forward with a new partner I met after my divorce, and I'm enjoying fulfilling days both professionally and personally. An old man with dementia is nothing but a burden, I thought. The idea of spending my remaining years caring for someone in such a state was unbearable. I longed for a fresh start in a new home with a new partner. My mother-in-law, clearly determined to leave her husband behind, was ready to start anew despite his condition and the $3.3 million debt he carried. "I can't continue as his wife any longer," she declared. "You, on the other hand, seem to get along with him. Take care of his debt and look after him, will you?" With that, she left the house she had shared with him for many years, leaving me with a mixture of shock and loneliness. Seeing her leave so cheerfully was jarring. I approached my father-in-law, who stood quietly at the entrance. "Thank you, Tom, for always treating me with kindness," I said. "I appreciate that you consider me like your real daughter. As your daughter-in-law, I'll do everything I can. Let's work through this together." Despite my words, I was filled with uncertainty about how to support him and alleviate his suffering. Yet, I felt a strong resolve to encourage him and envision a brighter future. When I noticed his shoulders trembling, I leaned in, thinking he was crying. To my surprise, he was chuckling. "I've been waiting for her to leave for a long time," he said, catching me off guard. He began to share stories from the past and his plans for the future. "I'm Naomi, 42 years old, and I lead a vibrant life with my wonderful husband, Harry, and his loving parents. Originally from a small town in Chicago, I moved to New York for university and then dove into the IT industry. It was there that I met Harry, my calm and serious boss. As we grew closer, we began to envision a future together. We decided to marry, and I chose to live with Harry's warm family. Although I was initially nervous about living with his family, having been raised by just my mother, the challenges of dealing with my fertility issues made me yearn for a lively family life. My father-in-law, Tom, was the president of the company I used to work for. Harry, his son, had started from the bottom and was steadily climbing the ranks. It wasn't until we decided to marry that I realized Harry was the son of the company's top executive. After our wedding, I left my job, but Harry continued to rise through the ranks. He started questioning Tom's business policies and had ambitions to grow the company himself. As Tom aged, rumors spread that he might retire, and Harry seemed to be waiting for that moment. Despite his age, Tom remained energetic and eager to try new things. He recently expressed a desire to create a space in his home for the local community to relax, chat, enjoy tea, and share homemade meals. However, my mother-in-law was completely against this idea. Even though she was only 5 years younger than Tom and meticulously maintained her appearance, she wasn't great at housework. Their meals were mostly takeout, and they often hired professionals for cleaning. Their affluent lifestyle was supported by Tom's stable job, but with his impending retirement, their income would decrease. The prospect of having strangers in their home for the community space stressed my mother-in-law. Despite Tom's respect for her wishes, he couldn't give up on his dream. Consequently, the renovation project was postponed. In the end, Tom decided to step down due to health concerns. Harry was chosen as the next president, but instead of taking over all at once, he would gradually learn the ropes until he was ready for full responsibility. My mother-in-law had become increasingly distant from my father-in-law. Even when he appeared tired and worn out, she ignored him and offered no support. The tension in their home grew palpable as she struggled to support his dream, and their interactions became strained. When Harry first began taking over the business, he and his father maintained a close and communicative relationship. However, as Harry gained confidence in his role, his demeanor at home began to change. He started treating his father with the same coldness that his mother displayed. Tom began to voice concerns about Harry's behavior at the company. Despite Harry's enthusiasm for his work, Tom worried that his son's attitude towards his colleagues and the work environment was problematic. Tom once confided in me that he feared Harry might be too harsh with his subordinates. Having experienced my own parents' divorce and a limited relationship with my biological father, Tom holds a special place in my heart. He's always been warm yet self-disciplined, and I deeply respect him as if he were my own father. He also cares for me and has started to share his thoughts and feelings with me, which has made it all the more painful to witness the growing distance between him, my mother-in-law, and Harry. Both were stubborn and resistant to any attempts I made to encourage openness. Then, one day, my mother-in-law suggested a family meeting. She proposed selling their current house and building a new one. I was intrigued by how the family would respond. "There's an old house for sale next door," she said. "It's a bit dated, but with some care and attention, it could become a beautiful home." We could even create a lovely space in the garden for everyone to enjoy. Her enthusiasm was a refreshing change from her usual reluctance. Tom's eyes lit up at the idea. That sounds wonderful. We could definitely make a space in the garden for everyone to enjoy. Harry smiled and said, "If it makes you happy, I'm all for it." And so, plans for the new house began, with my mother-in-law taking the lead on the project. When I inquired about the progress of the new house, my mother-in-law confidently told me to leave it to her and not to interfere. She seemed to be communicating frequently with Harry, and I assumed things were going smoothly. However, I was stunned when I received shocking news. My father-in-law had accumulated a debt of $3.3 million. Despite his reputation as a seasoned business figure with substantial investment experience, his calm demeanor had concealed the scale of his financial troubles. My mother-in-law's first reaction was to worry about the future of the new house. Although my father-in-law tried to reassure her, saying, "Don't worry, everything will be all right, I'll sort it out," her anxiety was palpable. She began treating him even more coldly than before. One day, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I overheard a hushed conversation between Harry and my mother-in-law. They were discussing the ownership of the new house, and I was shocked to learn that despite my father-in-law providing the funds, they were planning to proceed with the house under Harry's name without informing Tom. I couldn't believe they were making such a significant decision without involving him. Aren't you both making decisions about such an important matter without including everyone? Shouldn't the whole family discuss this together? My mother-in-law's response was sharp. "You know, Tom is showing his age, and there's also the debt issue. Besides, you've only recently joined this family. It's best if you just observe and stay quiet for now. The only person I truly rely on is Harry." Her blunt words stung, and Harry didn't offer much of a response. He had been so absorbed in his work lately that our time together as a couple had diminished. The only person I genuinely trusted and could confide in was my father-in-law. Yet recently he seemed different. Where he once was lively and busy, he now spent more time sitting on the couch, lost in thought. I suspected that my father-in-law might be troubled by his debts, but it seemed like there was something more going on. "Have we had dinner yet?" he suddenly asked as I was finishing up the dishes. "We just had hamburgers, salad, and soup together," I replied after a moment of thought. "Right, sorry about that," he said and retreated to his room. His forgetfulness was unusual, and it made me uneasy. I suggested that he see a doctor, but he dismissed it with a laugh, attributing it to fatigue. When I spoke with my mother-in-law, she remarked, "Tom's charm was his intelligence and his money. Without those, he's nothing." I also discussed it with Harry, but he seemed preoccupied with work. He mentioned that things felt off and that there was a need for timely leadership at the company. Amidst all this, I felt a deep sense of loneliness, as if no one in the family was genuinely concerned. I repeatedly urged my father-in-law to see a doctor, but he consistently refused. His condition seemed to worsen, and I took it upon myself to research dementia, trying various approaches and continuously persuading him to get help. "You must be having a hard time," my mother-in-law said with a sigh and a cold smile. "Tom isn't the man he used to be. Once Harry takes over the company, everything will be his. Isn't it only natural that Tom should have nothing left?" Her eyes were colder than I had ever seen, a look I had never encountered before. Her harsh words and the growing tension in the house left me feeling both surprised and anxious. With the atmosphere growing more strained, I hoped that moving to a new house would help refresh our spirits. Finally, the moving day arrived. We hired professionals to handle the large furniture while we took care of the smaller items. My mother-in-law provided specific instructions such as where to place each item, and we followed them carefully. The last items to be moved were the cherished belongings of my father-in-law and me. I returned to our old place to fetch my father-in-law when my mother-in-law appeared unexpectedly. "Thank you, everything is sorted now," she said. "Actually, I've arranged another moving destination for you as well." Her shocking revelation left me speechless. I stammered, "What do you mean?" She handed me a note with the address of a nearby flat. Seeing her smiling face, I was at a loss for words. She cheerfully explained, "The new house will be for me, Harry, and Ted to enjoy, so you and Tom should start fresh in your new place." I couldn't grasp what was happening. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't leave my father-in-law alone. As I prepared to leave, she added, "Well, Tom needs you now. Do your best for him. We can think about what comes next when the time is right. My mind was spinning with shock and confusion. Who was this Ted she mentioned? I could hardly think straight. How can you abandon Tom after all the years of support he's given to the family? I asked, my voice trembling. She laughed, absent-mindedly playing with her hair. I want to enjoy my life too. I've taken care of Tom's needs, but daily life with him has become tedious. I want a fresh start with Ted. I couldn't believe her words. It seemed my mother-in-law was set on leaving her long supportive husband to pursue a new life with someone else. Tears welled up in my eyes. So all your plans for a new life come at our expense? With a glint in her eye, she replied, grow up a little. We all have the right to seek new beginnings. Besides, if people knew about Tom's $3.3 million debt, they'd reconsider too. For a moment, I was utterly speechless, struggling to process the gravity of her decision. I was stunned by my mother-in-law's audacity. Despite my shock and confusion, I knew I had to stay calm and handle the situation for my own sake. You're saddled with a $3.3 million debt, and continuing this marriage is unfeasible, she said dismissively. My husband seems to have a fondness for you, so you can manage the debt and take care of him. With that, she offloaded her responsibilities onto me and left the house without a second thought about the dire situation her husband was in. Watching her leave with such confidence, I was overwhelmed by a mix of shock and loneliness. After she departed, I approached my father-in-law, who stood dejectedly at the entrance. Tom, thank you for always being so kind to me, I said softly. I'm honored that you see me as your own daughter. I promise to do everything I can as your daughter-in-law. We'll face this together. Although I tried to comfort him, I was engulfed by anxiety, unsure how to support him and ease his suffering. Yet a deep desire to help the man I respected and to envision a brighter future for him filled my heart. As his shoulders began to tremble, I leaned in, worried that he might be crying. To my surprise, he was laughing uncontrollably. I've been waiting for her to leave for a long time, he said, his laughter still echoing. His unexpected reaction left me stunned. He continued, when she talked about wanting a new house, I saw it as an opportunity. She's so dependent on me that I hoped she'd ask for a divorce. I didn't expect to be kicked out of the house, though. I was dumbfounded by his revelation. His elaborate act had completely fooled me. Seeing the confusion on my face, Tom smiled gently. Naomi, I'm sorry things turned out this way, but don't worry about the investment. Even if it goes wrong, we won't lose much. Now the real adventure begins. When we arrived at the new house, my mother-in-law was visibly upset. Naomi, why did you bring Tom here? You two were supposed to move into a flat. Plus, my new boyfriend is coming tomorrow. Harry's taking over the business, so I need Tom's bank statements, she demanded, flustered. Tom, seemingly unaffected by her dismay, turned to her with a steely gaze. I know you plan to enjoy your time with your new lover, he said, shifting the atmosphere dramatically. My mother-in-law was taken aback, and Harry stood silent, watching the confrontation unfold. I've already transferred the ownership of this house to my name, my father-in-law said with a hint of apology. It'll be difficult for you to stay here now. His words left my mother-in-law speechless, her eyes widening in disbelief. But don't worry, I've found a flat nearby for you. Enjoy your new life with your boyfriend. I'll cover the rent for the first few months, he added, his smile cold. Until that day, my father-in-law had always dealt with my mother-in-law's selfishness with patience and a smile. But now his eyes were sharp with anger, and his stern demeanor seemed to make her shrink. I'm truly sorry, she said, her voice trembling as she fought back tears. I was scared when I thought you had dementia, and when I heard about the $3.3 million debt, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. But I've always loved you. I never imagined it would end like this. Her words were filled with regret and desperation, but it was too late for apologies. My father-in-law chuckled bitterly. The $3.3 million debt isn't as daunting as it seems. I married you for your vibrant spirit, not for your money. It's clear now that love isn't in your heart. I want to spend my remaining years in peace, and I don't want you here anymore. Please leave. Without even looking at her, he asked her to leave. Harry, stunned, gathered my mother-in-law's belongings and placed them by the door. He didn't want to abandon her but seemed to be trying to make amends with his father, perhaps to protect his own interests. What are you saying, Harry? Are you leaving me behind? Help me. Forgive me just one more time, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Ignoring her cries, my father-in-law and Harry walked into their new home. Her heartbreaking screams echoed in the tense atmosphere, but I followed them inside. Later, Harry made desperate attempts to reconcile with his father, but his work attitudes and interpersonal issues proved problematic. The company had another promising successor who had been performing well, and responsibilities were gradually being handed over to him. Consequently, my father-in-law entrusted the company to this new successor and stepped down as president. Harry, who had assumed he would naturally take over, was deeply shocked. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law began her new life in a small flat with her affair partner Ted. However, her new life didn't bring the happiness she had hoped for. Eventually, their relationship soured, leaving her alone once again. Concerned for her, I occasionally checked in on her. Her current state, far from her once glamorous days, was lonely and hard to witness. In contrast, my father-in-law and I began building a community space in our area. He provided the financial support, while I worked diligently to create a welcoming environment. The space became a local sensation, featured in magazines and online, and attracted many visitors. Riding this wave, we established an organization and expanded our activities. Harry, having left his previous job, now participates in our efforts. He used to be quite prideful, but through interactions with diverse people, I hope he becomes kinder and more compassionate. Together, we aim to fulfill Tom's dream and strengthen our community bonds, looking forward to many joyful days ahead.